Good afternoon and welcome to the Amputee Angler indoors. Boat update, neither side, like I said before, we're not in a rush, so we still haven't got the boat yet. It's winter storm time now, Christmas, New Year's coming up anyway. And if you're watching the telly at the minute, probably best you don't, to be fair. But yeah, it looks like everything's ramping up again with COVID, so who knows whether there'll be more lockdowns or anything in a minute. So neither side's rushing into anything right now, so that's where we're at currently with the boat. Not long now, the big pollock season is going to start, sort of late January, early February. Down here on the south coast, it's big pollock season, and certainly I'll be looking to get in a bit of that action, whether it's on my own boat or someone else's. I'll be looking to get involved with that. So to that end, I'm just going to talk a little bit today about the basics of wreck fishing with lures. And the lures I'm talking about are mainly the shads and the sidewinder evolution red gills and some twin tail stuff I'm going to come on to. So I'm not going to talk about slow jigging or fishing direct to a weighted lure. I will do a separate video on that because it's got its own separate techniques and stuff. But what I am going to talk about is the basics of wreck fishing, a bit of etiquette, how to fish a wreck, and what the tackle we're going to need for it. So let's get into it. I see a lot of people fishing lures different ways. You know, some it's quite obvious they're not too sure how to fish a lure, and others they're making up different rigs and stuff like that, which is absolutely fine. It's each to their own. I'm only going to show you my way because it's the way I know and the way I like. So if you do something differently, as with anything, it's not wrong. But this is an effective way that I've used, and it's really basic. So first of all, how do we fish a wreck? All right, a wreck is obviously something on the bottom that's sunk, but this is also a method for reefs and any sort of rough ground as well. What we're going to do first is you've got to obviously locate your wreck. If you can't find the wreck, then you're not going to be able to fish it. It goes without saying. So make sure you got it all plotted first. You can use your Navionics app that I showed in the last video for that, and I'll put a link in that for you in the description. But you've got to find the wreck first. Now, the tide and wind play a massive effect on how you're going to fish the wreck. And as you get a bit more experienced, you'll start to be able to counter when there's a bit of wind blowing or a bit of tide. You'll be able to judge your drifts quite well. It does take a bit of practice to get it right. But you're going to come up to your wreck, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start up tide of the wreck, and then we're going to get our position. If you know where the tide's running, you can sort of roughly work out in conjunction to where your boat is and the wreck is to which way you're going to drift over it. But you don't want to be going straight bombing in. Have a drift first just to see which way the tide is going to take you over the wreck. Now, if I'm not anchoring the wreck, I like to do it off of where I'm going to be fishing, because then I'm not disturbing the wreck. In deeper water so much, it doesn't matter, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But I like to sit off the wreck, work out my drift line, make sure your track's turned on your plotter, obviously, so you can see where you're drifting. And then all I do is I simply off the wreck, and then I take that mark on the plotter, and I just simply move up a little bit, and I'll have my first drift, and then I'll start fishing. If you don't do that, what can happen is you can end up chasing your tail all day trying to get the correct drift, and you might end up doing 3 or 4 drifts before you hit the wreck. Whereas if you just take 10 minutes to do a nice slow drift and work out your line, you then get bang on it, okay? Also, likewise, I'm going to come on to this in etiquette a bit further in the video, but if there's other people fishing the wreck, just stand off of it before you go and do your drift line, unless it's someone you know or you can see they're starting a fresh drift, in which case you can just slot in behind them and work it out. But so many things come into play: boat sizes, which way your engine is, which way you've got your wheel round, because obviously if you've got your wheel not straight, the tide pushing along the rudder of the engine is going to spin your boat around and move it differently to the person in front of you potentially. So there's a lot of factors to think about, and that's why we do a drift off the wreck first, or that's how I do it at least anyway. Also, how is the wreck laying across the tide? If it's running north to south and your tide is taking you east to west, you can actually be pretty certain of hitting it, especially if it's a bigger wreck. You can hit it pretty much first go, because you've obviously got that entire length to hit on your drift. If it's running the same way the tide's running, you've only got to be off of it slightly and you're missing it either side. Now, you'll still pick fish up down the side of the wrecks, but you obviously want to be trying to go over the top of it, because that's where a lot of the fish are predominantly going to be laying. So have a look at it first if you can on the Navionics app or on Rexite EU or on your plotter if you've got 3D on there, and just see how it's laying first, because again that will affect how you drift the wreck. Once you've done that, obviously you also could do with knowing how proud it stands. By proud I mean how high off the bottom, because that's going to tell you how many turns you need to turn up. Because again, when you get a bit more experience, you'll learn. I know you'll see this if you've been out with some charter skippers. A good charter skipper will tell you how many turns to come off the wreck. If your wreck's only small and it's standing 10 foot high, there may not be a need to come 30, 40 turns up, because you're going to be way, way above the wreck. And that works for some species like pollock and if you're bait fishing bream, but primarily you want to be coming over the top of the wreck. So it's no good you coming all those turns up if your wreck's only sitting quite close to the bottom. Likewise, if you've got a wreck that stands up 60, 70, 80 feet or more, which we have out here in the channel, it's no good you only going 10 turns up, because one, you're just going to end up snagging the wreck and losing all your gear, and two, you're not necessarily going to be picking the fish up that are sitting above the wreck. So, you know, you've got to really know, it's not just a case of rocking up to a wreck and just going across it with no care in the world. You know, you'll pick fish up like that, but if you want to get good and pick up the other little fish and start targeting different species, which you can do, then you've got to know all these sort of things before you even put a line in the water. That said, let's come on to the rigs, okay? Now, it is very basic. And I see a lot of people fishing shads and lures with three-way swivels and flying collars and the rest of it. You know, each to their own. That's absolutely fine. It works. It catches fish. As long as you've got a lure tied to the end of your line somewhere, the chances are it's going to pick up a fish if they're there, especially in numbers, because they'll be competing for more food. So they're inclined to be a bit more aggressive with what they're doing. So they won't care about presentation so much. But the way I fish is just with a simple plastic boom. And I use exactly the same booms for turbot fishing. Those of you who have watched my turbot videos will know this is how I rig up my turbot gear. So when I'm making these up, I'm not making up a set of gear for wrecking. I'm not making up a set of gear for turboting. This is all multi-purpose. And it's just a thick plastic boom. I guess that's what, 6 inches? And I think that is a man 6 inches, but it's 6 inches. You get different types. You can get some really flimsy ones, and I think they're probably more designed for bream fishing or bait fishing, but I've seen people use them for wrecking. Make sure you get a good solid thick plastic one, because otherwise it will just snap. As soon as you get a snag up or you get a bit of weight on and a bit of tide, it will just snap. These ones here, they're a couple of quid. I think this is a Tronics Pro one, and it does me brilliant. I've made these up myself, and it's got a bit of 80-pound rig body line in there, but you can use anything that's got a bit of thickness with it. And then we've got a simple clip swivel on the end, and then a little loomy bead, not for attraction, just to stop the boom hitting the knot. The booms come with a built-in swivel, so it's just a clip swivel put on. Your weight obviously goes direct onto there. Little length of line, and then I've just got another little loomy bead again to stop the knots. You probably don't need one on this end, because this one here is what I clip to my clip swivel that goes to my rod. I always have a clip swivel, and I just simply double overhand knot. Nothing special. That's never going anywhere, so don't think you've got to do anything fancy. And you just clip that onto your clip swivel. That then goes down with your weight on it. This is actually back to front, this boom, ignore this. And then this here then clips on to your length of fluoro, which we'll come on to in a minute. And that's it really. You haven't got to make that too long, and it's nice and easy. Then onto this, we're going to have a bit of fluorocarbon with a swivel, an everyday standard swivel, and that then will just lock into there and go on. And then you have your length of fluoro. Now, those of you who have watched my other videos will know that I don't like fishing massive long traces whether I'm wrecking or whether I'm turbot fishing or bait fishing on the ground. I don't like it because I don't think it affects the fishing that much. I really don't. I've seen nothing to say that it does, and I've tried it multiple times, and I don't think there's a requirement to be fishing. I've seen guys fishing 12, 14 foot traces sometimes, and it makes my eyes twitch a little bit. And the reason being is once this gets up to your clip swivel that goes on your main line to your rod hits that top eye, it's not going anywhere else. So then from there, if you're fishing a 12-foot trace, you've then got to get that by hand, let go of all this here on the left, and you've then got to hand pull the fish in. Now, if you've got a big fish on there, one, you're having that extra 10-15 seconds to pull it in could be the difference between it shaking the hook loose at the boat, because we all know a big fish will start going mental when it sees the boat or the net. So not only have you got to pull that extra line in, also then if that fish decides to run again with wet hands, even a wet glove, it's just going to pull out and start taking line again. And if you let go of it, or it manages to run off on a big deep run, and conger eels especially do this, then you've then got to try and get that rod again. There's been a big slack line bow in your trace, and that fish is going to go. That's why I don't fish more than 5 foot when I'm wrecking. You know, maybe even 6 foot, but no more than that at all. And there's just no need for it. So that's that, and then obviously then you're going to go to the end tackle your hook, which is the most important bit, because without a hook on your line, you're not going to catch your fish. Variety of different lures that I use. They're all weighted. I fish mostly sidewinder gear because it is quality, but again, when the fish are there, they will take anything. Don't get sucked into having to buy the most expensive lures, because especially when you're wrecking, you're going to lose a hell of a lot of gear. And especially if you take people out with you for a day out, they lose a lot of gear and it starts becoming really expensive. But I like these ones because they're just quality material, and they don't you know, they're not too soft, but they're also got a bit of durability in them, and they fish well because they've been tested. So different types we use. All right, we've got the standard little shads. Now this is a 4-inch shad, and they're weighted in the head, so you don't need any extra weight on. Obviously you've got your weight going to your boom, but you don't need anything else between here and the shad. It's got a lovely little paddle tail, and these actually work quite well in the rivers as well if you know how to fish them. And this is a nice little blue one, and they come in a variety of different colours. You know, you think of a colour, they come in it. And these are the little 4-inch ones. You do get 6-inch as well, and the hook point here sits on the top, and they are razor sharp, which is another reason for getting a slightly more expensive lure, is you just get a better hook quality with them. That's the little 6-inch shads. We also do then the little sidewinders, the scary eels. This is cotton candy. Again, what that looks like in real life, I don't know, but this has had a lot of success this year for me and a lot of people inside on the reefs. You can fish this one actually just as it is direct, but that's a whole nother story. But I fish these on the boom setup as well. Slightly bigger ones, another version of that. It's got a slightly longer tail. And this is a red gill one, but it's got a lot of movement in there. And again, this is a 6-inch shad, that one. This one here is a vibro. It's a red gill vibro shad. It's got little like serrations in the bottom of it that cause a little bit of noise and movement through the water. I know you can't smell this, but it actually smells delicious as well. This has got an aniseed flavour to it. I've caught fish on this. I don't use it too much because it is quite a big lure, but the pollock smashed this in the early part of the year. The pollock absolutely go crazy, and they come in different colours. What the aniseed flavour does, I don't know, but it certainly attracted me and probably made me buy them more than anything else, to be fair. Then you can also have the very similar red gills. These are the miniature ones. Now, compared to something like this, there's quite a size difference. Now, they can be quite finicky sometimes, and a big pollock will take that, as will a bass. And sometimes you get a thing called tail tapping. I call it tail tapping. You might call it something different. But sometimes when they're feeling a bit finicky, and it's often a case when there's only a few fish on the wreck, so they're not competing as much, or perhaps they've had a big feed. If there's a lot of whitebait in the water and they're a little bit lazy, then sometimes they won't engulf the whole lure. They won't engulf the whole lot. They just come out, they snatch it, and you'll find you'll get bites, but you won't connect. And that's where they're just grabbing the tail and they're not getting the whole thing in their mouths. You'll often get this with pout as well. If there's a lot of pout on the wreck and you're fishing a 6-inch lure like this, or a shad maybe, is you'll get a lot of tail tapping because they can't get the whole thing in their mouth. But they are very aggressive pout, as are whiting. So it's often, if you scale down your size, and maybe a little, this is a smaller version of this one, obviously different colour. So by scaling down, you'll either A, start picking up the pout so you know what the answer to your bites is, or B, you'll actually get more hookups because it's an easier meal for them to swallow. Now, big pollock will do that tail tapping thing. You know, some days they just engulf the whole lot and they take thing that's 4 times that size. But other days they're a bit finicky, and you'll find just by changing your lure size, you will pick up a bit more fish. So always have a few smaller sizes in your arsenal. And the last one is a twin tail, and I'm going to do a separate video straight after this on how to fish this. because this is actually designed to be fished hard on the bottom, and it's not designed to be fishing over the lure. I have to excuse my dog in the background. We've got a little puppy here, and she's playing with a little bucket outside, going crazy. Yeah, this is what they call a twin tail. Sole reason because they've obviously got a twin tail. And I'm going to come onto a separate video just in a minute how to fish this, because it deserves its own little 2-3 minute session, because I see a lot of people fishing these wrong, and these will pick you up a lot of cod in the winter, or even in the summer if they're there, when the other things won't. So we'll leave that in a minute, but again, that's heavily weighted in the front, all right? So that's the different sort of lures that I fish with. You can connect anything up to that trace. You know, it's each to their own. Everyone's got their preferences for colours, and I'll talk about mine in a minute. But I've seen people fishing all sorts of things on these, you know, floating plugs they send down 200 foot to the bottom, and I've seen people catch on it. It's not the way to do it, but if it catches fish, then who am I to argue with it, you know? And it's each to their own. But you don't need anything more than what I've shown you here to go out to catch fish. So if you're a beginner and you're thinking, how do I fish? This here will catch you fish. It will 100%, okay? Once you've set that up, all you're going to do is you are going to drop it down to the bottom. So you're going to start your drift up tide, well away from the wreck, having already worked out your line like we spoke about. Drop it to the bottom. Once it hits the bottom, all we're going to simply do is just retrieve it, okay? How many turns you want to do is entirely up to you. Some people like to do 10 turns. Some people like to do 20, 30, 40 turns. It all depends on the wreck and the angler, okay? What I will say is pollock tend to like to sit high above the wreck, and I found that cod will tend to sit more harder to the deck. That's not to say that's the rule of thumb, it's just what I've experienced, okay? So once you're over the wreck, don't be scared to keep winding up a little bit higher, because sometimes they will be sitting well above it. So you may pick up the odd fish, and there's been numerous times where anglers, including myself, skipper said, you know, reel up, we're going round, or you've done the end of your drift and you're giving it a quick bomb up and get it up, and you'll pick fish up halfway in the water. Sometimes even bass like to do that as well. So, you know, each to their own, but make sure that you get it up a certain amount of turns and let it down to the bottom again. Now, what you've got to do here is you have to keep an eye on your sounder to where the wreck is in relation to the boat. What I like to do personally is, as soon as I start to see that wreck nudging into the sounder, is I let my line down to the bottom and I start it fresh. Doesn't matter whether that's 3 or 4 turns into a 20 turn wind, or whether I'm at 20 turns. I like to get down in there, and that's that whole in it to win it situation. Now, there is 2 types of fishermen when it comes to seeing that wreck. There is the me type, where it's in it to win it, where you are getting close and tight to that wreck, and with that comes the reward of a few extra fish. But the downside of it is you often pick up a bit of snag and you will lose your gear, especially if there's a bit of rope or net on the wreck, which obviously we can't see from the boat. But I'm a big fan of that, and I like fishing hard into a bit of structure, because as we all know, fish like to get in there. The other type of people is when they see the wreck, they, oh my God, and they're fishing really high above it so they don't lose any gear, okay? Now, you are going to lose a few fish like that unless there is pollock sitting above it. It's each to their own. If you don't like losing gear and tackle, which no one does, then stay well clear of the wreck when you see it coming into your sounder, or the skipper says there's the wreck. If you do like having a bit of risk and a bit of extra fish and trying to pick out those big ones that are maybe lurking in the structure, as soon as it nudges into view, drop it down again and just start it again. Because by the time you've drifted there, normally your lines are going away from the boat slightly anyway. So when it comes into view on the back of your boat and the sounder and the transducer, you've got a little bit of time before your lure's coming past there anyway. And hopefully, with that fresh drop, you come up nice and just scrape that wreck and you pick up those extra fish. So that's the rigs and that's the setup. It is very, very simple and easy. And I like it like that. And like I said, with these booms, they then have a double purpose for turbot later on in the year and anything else that I'm fishing with. A quick one on colours. As you can see from these here, there is 101. Oh, hello, dog. This is my dog Luna. Say hello, Lou. Say hello. That's my dog Luna. And she's off again. She is zooming about all over the place. Just wanted to see what I was doing. Colours on lures. There are so many different colours all over the place, okay? And again, much like tactics and tackle, everybody has their favourite colours, and I've certainly got mine. I prefer pinks and oranges for pollock. You know, pink to make the pollock wink is what I say, and that is pollock with a P, not with a B. Pink for pollock. I just like that. I tend to find that I catch more on those colours. It probably is just a psychological thing, but I've found that in my experience. And then I tend to like a lot of blues and also firetails for bass. So, you know, there's a nice blue or a mackerel coloured one. White's also a good colour for bass, I've found, and then a shad that also does well for cod. But yeah, blues and oranges and reds for bass with a little bit of firetail in it, and then pinks and solid colours for the pollock. Rhubarb and custard is another classic cod colour, and that also does well for pollock. But again, it is an individual thing, so don't get too hung up on it. But if you do find that, if you're on a boat, on a charter boat especially, do pay attention to what other people are catching on, because sometimes it's not just down to the skill of the angler. Sometimes they do just want something different, depending on what feeds down there. They want a lure that looks like that, or they want a lure that looks like that, or they might want one that looks like that. So, you know, do pay attention to it. If there's 2 or 3 of you on a boat going over a wreck for the first time, stick a different coloured lure on, each of you, and have a go and see what picks the fish up, because it does sometimes make a difference. But again, you know, preference to who does what on there. Okay, so that is the rigs and lures and the colours. I'm going to come on to something a little bit now, which is a big thing for me, and that's etiquette. By that I mean manners. You know, manners when fishing a wreck. Nothing frustrates me more, and if you followed me for a little while, you'll understand that I don't like fishing with other people and other boats. I would rather be on my own somewhere, miles away from anybody else. I'm not very sociable when it comes to boat fishing, for a number of reasons. One, I don't like people knowing where I'm fishing, and 2, I like the peace and quiet of finding my own ground and having a bit of fish to myself. But the main reason is, especially at weekends, and this isn't everybody, so if you fish weekends, don't think I'm digging at you, but you get the weekend warriors, the noddies out there, and they don't know how to conduct themselves on a bit of fishing ground. Now, when it comes to wreck fishing, do your pre-drift first to work out which way you're drifting. If you're coming onto a wreck with other people, wait till someone starts their drift and slot in behind them, give them enough space and let them drift down through it, and just drift down through it. Once you come to the end of the drift, you're then going to then start your engine up. Now, whether you have your engine on or off, I don't keep my engine on over wrecks. I just don't do it. One, because it burns more fuel, but depending on the depth of water, the engine noise could scare the fish below you, and that does happen. So something to bear in mind when you're doing that. But get to the end of your drift and then start your loop again. And when you go back round to the wreck to your start point, which you hopefully would have marked at the start of the, you know, on your plotter at the start of your drift, give the wreck a wide berth. So if that's your wreck and you're coming off the back of it, go around it in a big loop, a half moon, semicircle, whatever you're going to call it. Just go right around the wreck. Don't bomb over it, because all you're going to do is scare the fish, start going head on with other boats, and it's just going to cause all sorts of arguments and dramas. I've been there, I've done it, I hate it, it's my pet hate, I don't like it. So think about what you're doing and how you conduct yourself when you're on these wrecks. Now, boat noise, engine noise and shadows of a boat can all affect fishing, primarily in shallow water. So if you're on an inshore wreck or an inshore reef, be very conscious about the footprint that your boat is making. Now, by that I mean the noise. If the water's slapping on the boat's slapping on the water, that will scare the fish if you're only fishing in 20 foot. Likewise, that size of your boat, no matter what size boat you've got, is going to put a shadow and a silhouette, especially on a bright sunny day, straight down below you, and the fish will know that something's up and they will move away from your boat. So just be conscious of that. And as I mentioned a minute ago, your engine, right? If you're drifting somewhere shallow, just switch the engine off. There's no need to have it on. If you're scared that it's not going to start again, which is something I've heard before, then you shouldn't be out the harbour anyway. Because if your boat's not going to start every time you turn the engine off, something is drastically wrong. Okay, so don't be scared to turn it off, because that's what it's designed for. And then likewise, if you're out in deep water, the shadow and the noise from your boat's not going to affect the fish in 200 foot of water. By the time it gets down there, the sound is long dispersed. And if you're out in a channel, there's boats going out up and down that channel all day long that are 50, 100 times bigger than you are, and drawing a lot more water and making a lot more disturbance. In a deeper water, the shadow and the sound of your boat doesn't have that much of an effect. but in the shallower water, you just need to be aware of it, okay? So a few points to take note of there. That's the end of my video on wrecking. I'm going to do another one now on twin tails, just how to fish them, because it's worth its own separate little video. But if you've got any questions or any tips on what I've covered, please do leave a little message in the comments. And likewise, if you like the videos and you're gaining something from it, give it a thumbs up and a comment, and maybe share it on. If you're taking someone fishing, or you're going on a charter boat and someone's asking questions, how do we fish a wreck? Point them my way, send them a link from the video, and just show it to them, because it really helps me build it, and it helps me know that people are watching what I'm doing, okay? The hardest thing for a YouTube channel is to get to 1,000 subscribers, and also YouTube doesn't start showing you much to other people until you get 30, 33 videos up. So I'm well behind that at the minute, so any like and share I get really helps me. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all right? We'll be on LinkedIn soon as well. So please do like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.